our fifth and final element in our study on user experience design. This particular one, we're going to have a look at thinking and how people, or the types of thought processes that people are likely to have when they're using software. So we'll start off again. It's going to be a reasonably mixed bag of content within this in terms of just teasing out some of the characteristics about how people in general think and process information. This is not simply specific to the use of software, it's about us in general. So we'll start off first of all using mental models. So anytime we come to use an item of software, and this could be a game, could be a banking app, it could be TripAdvisor, doesn't matter. We either will have established a mental model or we will be in the process of building up a mental model as to what we expect of this. So the types of outcomes that it can provide, the types of information that we'll have to do, the processes that we'll have to go through. So we are quite strongly driven to build mental models about what we and how we expect things to happen. And this gives us an opportunity because if we are creating an item of software and it is in a certain genre or a certain type, then by tapping into and making a bit of an effort to understand what mental models people have, we can help dictate how we design our piece of software. So things that tie in with the mental models that people have will work well, will meet expectations. Things that break it can be more dangerous. If you're going to break a mental model, it must be because you have a better way of doing it and the user will be able to see this. If it's simply different, it's just more likely to frustrate the user. Second point, we can't really multitask. I think a lot of people claim that they can, and a lot of people say, oh, of course we can, but the reality is we can't. I'll touch on the aside at the bottom first of all, that there are a few examples. So for example, if we're talking about driving a car, we can drive a car whilst engaging in some other activity in terms of thinking. But if we're talking about thinking processes, we can't multitask. We can pay conscious attention to one item at a time, and if we have multiple items that we're trying to do, we've got to keep jumping between them, and this actually is a reasonably inefficient thing for us to do. Indeed, if you look at say some of the agile and lean development techniques, they're actually designed, something like Kanban, so that you do not overburden people with multiple tasks that they're all trying to do at the same point in time. You let them focus on one, maybe two tasks, get them to do it well, then go on to the next one. That actually is a more efficient process for us. What that means in terms of our applications then is that we want to be cautious about designing something where we enforce or require the user to consciously think and balance multiple things at the same time. And sometimes within, for example, games, it's an interesting play mechanism. That's fine, the way of providing challenge to the user. But within an application, if we're asking the user to do something, we should ask the user to do a single thing, then move on to the next one, as opposed to try to mix and match a number of things together. Progressive disclosure, and a rather nice picture of lovely chocolate here. Progressive disclosure, all about giving too much of a good thing all at the same time, or too much information all at the same time. So if we have generated some results that we want to provide to the user, or if we want to collect a form's worth of information from the user, there is risks in providing this all in one go. In that it can overwhelm the user. So sometimes, and quite often it's the case, progressive disclosure. Now, progressive disclosure, if you can predict the order in which the information will be needed by the user, or the order in which the information the user would want to provide it. So as long as there is a progression route from a start through to an end, or a sequence in which you can present it, that's fine. If there isn't, just give it all at once. But where there is a sequence to it, then quite often it is useful to progressively disclose it, to say, well, here's some information, digest this information. When you're happy with that, hit next, I'll give you some more information. Or if you're getting information in for a form, to say to the user, okay, first of all, tell me these things. Now tell me whatever you want to ask next. Recognition is easy, recall is hard. So again, this is about how we work. If we see something, an icon, a label, or whatever, it's very easy for us to recognize, as long as we've used it in the past, what that does, what's that about. So we see, I see this, I've seen that before, I know I click there if I want to do this or to find out about that. Recall is very much more difficult. Recall is where there is no visual information for us to recognize and then to link through to it. But we've got to think, okay, if I want to do this, how do I do this? Okay, I have to navigate there, I have to click on this button. That, generally speaking, unless the user's gone many times, it requires significantly more conscious thought and effort. So where possible, we should provide visual clues, if you like, linkage points within our interface design so that the user can recognize and then link through to other related activities. Pictures are good. As mentioned the previous one, reading isn't natural. We have to chunk glyphs together. We then have to understand and recognize the word. But actually we are very efficient at recognizing pictures we've seen before. So icons. Just a little aside, the ones you see here, they're drawn in the sort of canonical perspective. It's 3D, but the user's kind of looking down slightly from above them. That, generally speaking, is the easiest perspective for us to be able to quickly recognize different icons. Feeling motivated. It's just a general human trait that we feel motivated if we know how close to the end that we are. So we're in control of something, we're making progress, we're getting closer to the goal at the end of it. That process of feeling us moving forward, of making progress, is something that actually acts to motivate us. And if we know that we're fairly close to the end, we've done this and the end's only a little bit off, we normally are quite strongly motivated to finish the thing, to get it done, get it out of the way. And this can be to our benefit. So whenever we are designing our applications, particularly getting information from the user or doing some process, it is useful to have a progress bar, or to show some measure of progress, so the user can see him or herself getting closer to the end of it. And whenever it goes up to 80-90%, they're thinking, oh, I'm nearly there. They'll be quite motivated to either wait it out or to provide those last few items of information. Another bold claim, we as a species were rather lazy, and that actually is true. One saving grace here is that we're lazy really from an efficiency perspective. So it's not lazy for the sake of being lazy, it's lazy for the sake of being efficient. And I'll give you a couple of examples. The main one is known as satisficing, that you see here, that good enough is just fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. What this means is if we have an application where we present to the user, here are 5 options to do whatever the user wants to do. Quite a lot of the users, unless they have a strong commitment and investment in getting the best possible outcome, a lot of users will look down through the list of options, and when they find one that looks good enough, that probably is the case, they'll click on it. That's all they'll want to do. They're not going to consider all 5, weigh them up, and then say, that is the best one for me. A lot of users will simply look for the first one that seems to be okay, and then go with that particular one. So we're lazy in the sense of we don't consider all options. We don't automatically go for the thing that is going to be optimal. If it looks good enough, sure, that'll be all right. And you can blame actually evolution for this, that in terms of evolutionary pressures and where important split-second decisions need to be made, quite often there isn't the opportunity, the time to ponder all of your options and to think what is the best one. It wouldn't help if there was a chance to sit back and to think, if I had climbed the tree, I probably would have been able to escape from the man-eating tiger that has now caught me. Sometimes in evolution, you just need to make a good decision quickly and to go with that, even though it may not be an optimal decision. So this is actually an image from the Don't Make Me Think book by Krug. It's quite a good one about making life easy for the user. We've got 3 examples here on a spectrum from obvious on one side through to requires thought and pondering on the other side. So jobs is over in the obvious side. So if we're looking for jobs and we see a button that says jobs, click it, easy. One in the middle, employment opportunities. So we have to read that. It takes a bit more effort to read than it does to read jobs. We probably need to go jobs, employment opportunities. Yeah, they're synonymous, same thing. Click on that particular one. The one on the right hand side where it says Joborama, could be jobs, might be something else. We're not entirely certain. So the user might click on it, or they might carry on looking around the page until they don't find anything else and think, well, I'll click on that just to find out. So the notion of don't make me think, of making it obvious and clear and straightforward to the user so that whenever they scan through and they see something, yeah, that's what I want, click on it. That's ideally what we're trying to do. That will give us applications which are easy for the user to use, that are intuitive, and ultimately then will give us more happy users. So a way of tying this together then, we tend to satisfy when we are using applications. We pick the first decent option that we find and we go with that. And we should try to design things so that we quickly present good options to the user. We don't overburden them, or where we have that, it's available but not it doesn't get in the way of their thought process. We tend to like interactions that are intuitive, that don't require us to put in a lot of thought, where it's clear, as obvious, if I do click on this, then the following will happen. And in terms of our apps that we design, generally speaking, we only want to let the user focus on one task at a time, not to get them try to balance multiple things. So one item at a time, give them the information that they need, don't overload them with too much information. Let them know how close they are to completing that. And if we do that, that's going to help them more efficiently travel through this and keep them on board by way of bringing them to the end of that process. So that brings us to the end of all of the talks that we have on user experience design. We've only scratched the surface of it. We've teased out a few guidelines, nothing more than that, or principles in terms of how we can design a lot of our software to make it as usable as possible. Just as a reminder, linking back to the very first talk on user experience design, user experience is much broader than simply usability, and really would encourage you to have a read of the directed reading that we covered in the first talk, because this stuff is quite important. Ultimately, the software that we create is for the benefit of our users. We want to make it as enjoyable, as intuitive, as easy to use as we can for our user base. And it's our responsibility to do that. And unless we think about it carefully, and unless we take a lot of care and attention, it's not going to come about on its own, or statistically that's very unlikely. So do have a look at the directed reading in that, because it is the type of thing that will fundamentally help you create better applications from here on after.